So, welcome to the second session of our Facing Our Futures discussion group. And our last session, the first session, is available on recording, and most of you have access to recording who need it to. This is also being recorded, and hopefully will be available in a day or so for those who can't make this call. There's going to be a third session, and the third session, as we talked a bit about last time, will not be based on the book Chronicles of the Upheavals. We're going to talk about facing our future, and what the subject is going to be is what is the new normal for us? What is the new normal going to mean to us? And so I would invite you to invite some of your friends to that, since the conversation is not going to be based on did you or did you not read this in the book, but based on our understanding of the situation that we're in right now, the situation that some of us are beginning to call the new normal. What will our new normal look like? That day, so that's next Wednesday, same time, and same link. What that new normal look like? What will it look like for us in terms of our spirit and our consciousness? What will it look like for us in terms of our systems and structures? What systems and structures, by systems and structures, I mean our economics, our transportation, our housing, all the things that we take for granted when they're functioning, and you understand how important they are when they're not, like our electricity, like your plumbing, okay? So all of those things we'll be looking at. What are the new systems and structures that we're going to need to look at? And then what are the old ones that need to go away? What are the ones that need to disappear now that we're looking at a new society with new realities to it? Again, that'll be next Wednesday. I would invite you to invite your friends, and we'll have an interesting discussion. Okay, so what I want to talk about today, and thank you for those of you who signed on to the issues document so that I have an idea of what we're going to cover. And what that idea is we're going to focus on water. We're going to focus on spiritual cultural issues. And then if we have time, we're going to get to a couple of the ones that only got a single vote. That would be economics and our habitat and our housing issues. So that will definitely more than cover a couple of hours for us. I wanted to talk about a couple of things before we got started with the discussion part. This is something that is coming up more and more, that I'm hearing more and more. And that is one of the key elements of our new normal, one of the key elements that we see in the book, that we see in Chronicles of the Upheavals, is what I'm calling overcoming individuality. I'm speaking especially to the American culture right now, that we're overwhelmingly occupied with me, with what's good for me. What do I want? What are my wishes? How do I win, etc. We're willing to look at what's good for me at the risk of each other, at the risk of our planet, at the risk of our total connection. And Greg, I'm going to ask you to unvideo yourself there. And thank you. And so, so even as we're thinking about the new, our new reality, even as we're thinking about all the turmoil that's going on around the world right now, so much of the dialogue is, when are things going to get back to the point where they're good for me? And as soon as we get to the point that they're good for me, I can stop. That means that everything is fine, and I'm just going to keep going back to what I've always done. Many of us have wondered why, in the face of overwhelming evidence of our ecological damage, and the overwhelming evidence of the fact that our climate is changing rapidly and not in a way that's going to be good for any of the beings on the planet. Why do people ignore that? And I think that that one of the key answers is right where I'm talking. It's not bad for me right now, so I don't have to pay attention to it. Yeah, I may have to. It may be raining a little bit harder, or it may be, you know, some farmer out in the middle of Nebraska may be having trouble with their crops, but that's them. It's not me. And because I'm only focused on me, it's not really a problem yet. Even the people who are being impacted by it, the people who are living, for example, in Miami, that is experiencing more and more and higher flooding, okay? It's still a local event. It's like, oh, this is really a pain, but maybe I'll move my house up 10 feet. Maybe I'll complain to the city that they need to be doing something, but it's still not really affecting me, because I know that if it gets so bad, I'll move to, you know, Tampa, or I'll move to Atlanta, or I'll move to somewhere else, somewhere that will be good for me. I think that one of that focus, that preoccupation with the self, is probably the biggest stumbling block that we've got. It's the biggest enemy that we've got. And paradoxically, that enemy consists of me. Is that I'm the one who is that enemy. And so I think that what we can do, and what we should do, is learn to look at the world differently. I don't think you can do that by yourself. I think you have to put yourself in the midst of a community of people that are doing that. I think that that in order to change that thinking from creating a world that works for me, and then, or creating a world that works for me and my friends, to creating a world that works for all, and all of us are going to keep reminding us that all of us are in the room. I've had a number of situations where people will be talking about a problem like climate change, but they'll be talking about it from the point of view of their own culture. Climate change is bad because this is how it impacts my culture. Well, that's not the issue. The issue isn't that it's bad for your culture, it's that it's bad for the earth, it's Earth herself. And by getting us to a point that we can see that and recognize that we have an audience, and recognize that that audience is literally worldwide. Those of us who are in the American culture recognize that that culture impacts the whole world. It's time for us to impact it for good. Okay, that was one subject. My second subject is going to be a lot shorter. It has to do with sex. And I'm not quite sure what led my thought process to this, but one of the elements of the 60s revolutions, the Black Power Revolution, the Women's Revolution, the Rock and Roll Revolution, all of that, one of the things that fueled all of that was sex. That the folks who were in the various alternative cultures, what they're calling the counterculture movement, the folks who are in the various alternative cultures were getting laid a lot more than everybody else. And that became something that became very attractive to everybody else. Okay, so folks who were, and I was remembering this when I was first went on campus, when I was an undergraduate, of just looking at how people who may have been sitting on the fence jumped over the fence because there was a possibility that I'm going to have more fun over there. And so, oh shoot, I can't remember who said this. I was talking to him, to a friend, and this friend was a Barrett Kohler author who I can't remember his name right now. And I was saying, that our ship is going down. This is like the Titanic, where they said it was completely unsinkable and it sank to the bottom on its maiden voyage. So we've been saying, we have the greatest economy in the world, the strongest economy in the world, the biggest economy in the world, and our lower decks are already underwater. So we don't have to wait for something to happen. It's happening right now. And I said something like, we need to get on the lifeboats. And my friend said, what would happen if you didn't get on the lifeboat, but there was a party boat that pulled up alongside the Titanic and said, you have a couple of choices. You can stay on the Titanic and go down. You can get on a lifeboat and freeze your butt off under a blanket in the North Atlantic. Or you can hop on the party boat and we're going to be dancing and there's margaritas down there and we're going to be having fun. Who would want the rowboat as opposed to the party boat? So while we're doing all of this, I think we have to make it appear fulfilling. Now, he was being facetious about the party boat and the margaritas, okay? But what is it that would get us to say, wow, those folks over there look like they're having fun, okay? And for those of you who remember the chapter on the television interview where this movie celebrity gave up her fame and fortune in exchange for working in an awakening center and getting muddy, planting vegetables and building houses and things like that. The question is, what part of that is really, really attractive to people? What part of that is what someone would say, that really looks like fun? Some of you have heard this story before. I was at Brighton Bush Hot Springs, one of my favorite places on the planet. And they had drained one of the big meadow pools. and there was a woman who was down in the pool, and she had this really big brush, and she had rubber gloves on, and she had this like 50-pound barrel of baking soda, and she's scrubbing the algae off the rocks in the big pool. And I watched her for a while, and I said to her, I said, "It really looks like you're having fun." And she stopped and looked at me and looked at the rocks, and she said, "This is a labor of love. I love what I'm doing." And then she went back to the rocks. That is the energy that will propel a new society. It's not just a matter of, I'm doing this to make money. How many people, if they had adequate income, if they had the same income they had from working, how many people would still show up to work? I said that's my last story, but this is really the last story. When I was working with the Portland Bureau of Maintenance, all of them play the lottery, and one of them won the Oregon lottery for $7 million. So what would a blue collar worker do when he wins $7 million? Well, he went to work the next day, and the next day, and the next day, and the next day. He said, "I love the work that I'm doing. I love the people I'm working with. I don't know." He said, "Yeah, I got $7 million. I don't know what I would do with it. So I'm going to think about it for a while and maybe do something in a couple of years or so. But I love what I'm doing." So that's one of the markers of the kind of society that we need to build, is a society where no matter what you're doing, you're going to say, "I love what I'm doing. This is something that is pleasing to me and is pleasing to, and is helpful for all others." Okay, I'm really done now. I'm going to invite everyone to turn their video on. Leave your audio off until you're ready to talk. As I explained, and I heard a couple of people chiming in when I was talking, but I didn't see who's there. I'm going to see if I can do a quick look and see any new people here. So as I am you leave your video off, you leave your video on, but your audio off while we are in this mode. I don't in my phone mode. I can't see your hands waving, and because you're not all on one screen, I can't even see your meat hand waving. So I'm just going to rely on you to unmute yourself when you've got something to say, and turn your video on and turn your audio on, and then as when you're talking, I think that you'll flash onto my screen. I'm hoping anyway. So because in our voting, we said that water was going to be the first subject that we talk about today. And there were several chapters where we talked about water. There was the how things work, the moving water with the big balloons, the pillows. There was the water and energy wars. There's the subject of how do you do triage for cities that will not have enough water in the near future, etc. So I don't know if who wants to begin the conversation on water. I see that 3 or 4 people had signed up for that. So any of you can start, or anyone can start. Make sure you unmute yourself and say, at least clear your throat or something so that I can see you. Hello, and who is this?
Mary.
Okay, and you didn't pop up on my screen, so go ahead and I'm going to find. I'll scroll through and try to find you. Okay, there you go. So, yes.
Well, I think that the first thing that we have to do with water is to consider it sacred again. And if we do that, a lot of other things will fall into place. We need to make it illegal for places, groups, for corporations like Nestle to extract town water and bottle it and sell it for profit. And we need to look at some of I live in the Great Lakes area in Canada. We need to reassess the Great Lakes between Canada and the US. That's a North American issue, and how the Great Lakes are managed. But I think we need to respect water, and you don't have to be without it very long before you really, really fall in love with water.
Or at least understand exactly how important it is.
Yes.
Yes. And I think that I think that you raised this as a water point, but we may want to come back to that in some minutes when we start talking about spiritual and cultural issues, because what you're saying is exactly right. It is sacred. Now, whether it's considered sacred by this person, that person, or the other person is another story, and that is where we need to be. We need to start thinking about how we do that. How we teach people that this precious element, which is also part of the most abundant element in the universe. Okay, which is interestingly paradoxical. It permeates our entire universe, and also it's so precious that if you don't get enough of it, you're not going to be here.
Water is life.
So
can't have life without water.
Yeah. So what we're talking about is when I'm talking about creating a world that works for all, I'm talking about creating a world that works for all living beings. Yes. And that means I'm creating a world that works at the level of the sacred. Okay, and that's the juxtaposition. And I'm saying that from someone who was raised in a family and a culture that didn't have any particular respect for water at all. You know, it's what you use to flush your toilet. It's not, like, so what? As opposed to recognizing the preciousness of it. David, I don't know if you just waved your hand or not. You happen to be on the screen where I saw that. So if you want to go next, that would be good. Yeah.
I'm trying to unmute myself. Can you hear me?
I can hear you now. Yep.
Okay. I'm thinking that we almost need to quickly work on this while we still have COVID. Mm-hmm. And I don't think we'll ever not have COVID, but right now we're all facing the same problem. Right. And some of us are privileged. And I use that word deliberately, because normally before COVID, when we were told, well, you're privileged, we sort of rushed it off. We said, well, that's just luck, so what? And now we all understand that we need to be able to wash our hands. And it starts making more sense to us that the people that can't wash their hands whenever they want or use hand sanitizer they're not being treated fairly somehow. We need to take responsibility for that, because they're in the same boat we are. And we're not rocking the boat, but that's not the issue anymore. It's we're all in the same boat, and some people are not in the boat. So I think that somehow, while we're talking about life after, when things go back to normal, which they won't, but we have to somehow, and we won't remember this feeling that we have right now, I don't think. I mean, why did we dismantle our whole federal program about protecting ourselves from the next coronavirus. We did. We didn't do that because we don't remember what it was like with SARS in 2003. So I think we need to take advantage right now of the general feeling that people feel horrible about people in Flint that can't use the water to wash their hands right now. And people in 14,000 Oregon prisoners that have to live 3 feet apart from each other are facing terrible contagion and disease, and that's not fair. We set that up. So we are becoming aware of the deficiencies of our system by all facing this problem together. That's my point.
Okay. If I can say a couple of things with regard to that. I agree with you. Okay. I'm reminded of an exercise that I used in one of my workshops. I don't know how many of you saw the movie, which was the one that the asteroid movie that had Morgan Freeman as a very credible president. Deep Impact, and they gotten confirmation that a huge meteor was going to strike the Earth 2 years out. And what they did is all of the nations got together and they put aside all their differences and they built this spaceship to encounter this huge meteor and use nuclear weapons to blow it up. And I won't tell you what happened. In case you didn't see the movie, it's a very good movie. But so the president has this 2-year warning. Something's going to happen. It's definitely going to happen. It's going to happen really big. What would have happened if it had been an 8 or 9 year window? We know this rock is coming. It's going to slam into us, and it's going to happen in 8 or 9 years. Well, the president would probably put together a study commission, and they would probably do more research on it. And then the people who would say, "Oh, this is nothing but a scam," would come forward, and this is just the military contractors just want more money, and with all of that, with too much time available, nothing would have been done. And almost all of the things that we know right now, that we know are problems right now, we've known for a long time they've been problems. I've been doing this work, that level of work for 40 years. That's 4 decades. And I'm saying, hello, is anybody listening? And I get a few echoes back, but not a whole lot. And now it starts to hit us because it starts to hit middle class, white, Protestant Americans. Okay. Now, at some point in time, we're going to have to recognize that the world consists of more than just the people I'm comfortable with. The world consists, and another thing I do in a workshop is in a village of 100 people, how many different cultures are in it? How many different languages are in that village? How many different, everythings are in this village to get us a bigger picture of what our world looks like. David, I really agree with you that this is, and actually some people have been talking about the COVID opportunity. We have the opportunity to rethink. We have the opportunity to pause. This pause was not our doing. We didn't say, let's everybody in the world now, let's just take a pause. Okay, no, we're paused now. And the thing that we need to do from this is, again, start thinking about where this world starts to go. Okay, I'm not saying anymore. No more tonight. So another hand or question about, or comment about water. And I can see that, Eric, you put your, you voted for water, and also Helene, and also Catherine. So if one or another of you wishes to say something, you're more than welcome to do so.
I'll say something.
Okay, and who is
Elena?
okay, I see, gotcha.
I live in Southern California, and I read a number of years ago about how basically California and some of the southern states, whatever, near the border of Mexico, basically have been hoarding water that used to flow into Mexico. And so Mexico has less water now because of our damming of the water and storing water and things like that. And so it's definitely an economic problem as well, and a global sharing problem. And so I think that your book tries to address that. And I don't know, I guess it'd be nice to figure out how can we bring that forward more to this, this present time, because I know I'm one of those people that, I know it just seems like an insurmountable political issue.
Yeah. I number one, I agree. And have I been murdering your name? Can you pronounce your name again for me?
Helena.
Helena. Okay. I'll see if I can remember that. Well, Helena, I appreciate your comment that how we have done water in this country made sense 100 years ago, when all we saw was plentiful water everywhere. Dam the river? Why not dam the river? Look at how much water there is. Divert it for this industrial. Why not divert it for the industrial use? Why not put all your trash in the river? Look how big this river is. Okay, and that is thinking. That's 19th century thinking. A lot of 20th century thinking. We can't afford that any longer. And for us to move forward, we have to reconceptualize the entire thing. And this gets back to Mary's point that started us, to stop thinking about water as property. Right now, your water rights are like property rights. If you have land that abuts a stream, there's going to be some level of right that you have to the water in that stream. What we're finding is that that stream is so small now that those rights are starting to rub up against each other. And then when you bring international rights in there, like, kind of this, screw all the folks in Mexico. They're in Mexico. What are they going to do about it? Once we start recognizing that the water itself is sacred, at that point, we can start asking the question, what is good, not for me, not for the people downstream, not for the city, not for the farmer, not for the Native Americans. What's good for the river herself? What's good for this lake herself? And if we climb down from our high horse and get to a point where we can start asking that question, I think that we're going to see a very, very different reality. What we'll see is that when we cooperate with the water will cooperate with us. When we cooperate with the animals, as opposed to just having an industrial food machine that treats them like units of production instead of a living being, they will start to respond to that. So I think that we have to do something along these lines. Okay, anyone else in terms of thinking about or considering water? Is there anything else we need to say about water? Um, the ideas of moving water around or doing water triage or anything like that? Go ahead, Greg.
Okay, I think one thing that we really have to think about is how to make sure that anytime water is used in any process, that it's returned to the source in the same condition. We use water to cool industrial, et cetera, et cetera. I think in general, we need to make sure that part of the cost of producing something is leaving the water exactly the way it was found.
Or better, or better, yes. Yeah, I was working a project in Brazil where in the very poor favelas up in the hills outside of Rio, no water, no sewage. They they would urinate anywhere. To defecate, you get a plastic bag, you defecate into the bag, and then you throw the bag. You throw the bag away from you. They refer to them as flying toilets. And so, what the organization I was working with would do is they would put in into these small poor villages lavatories. Just like the plastic porta potties that you see at concerts and things like that. They just put some into a village, but the porta potty would no chemicals would dump into a series of holding ponds. And at each one of the holding ponds, it would do something biochemically, naturally and biochemically to the water, so that by the time this goes back into the stream, and I actually saw this, you could, at the place where it would go into the stream, you could put a cup under there and drink the water that came out of it. Now, all along the way, each process, each holding pond would generate a different kind of agricultural product, so that by the time the water goes back into the stream as clean as it came out, maybe even cleaner, it also generated tens of thousands of dollars worth of bananas, fish, ducks and duck eggs. I mean, each pond had an economic value to it, so that the half dozen people who were working these ponds, I mean, this is a living machine, so that people had to take the ducks and well, they had to take the duck eggs. Duck eggs are really good, by the way. They had to take the bananas and sell them. No, people would eat the bananas. People would eat the eggs. Nobody would eat the fish that came out of those ponds. It was something about the fish, the idea that the fish is eating your poop. It's almost like, what do you think the fish that you're eating now is eating? So they would have to take the fish to another village and sell the fish in that village over there, and then bring that village's fish into the first village. And by doing a fish swap, it makes the fish okay. So this was ingenious. No machinery needed, no high tech anything. This is actually the lowest of low tech, and all that is available to us. And in the book, I was seeing that all of the awakening centers were doing things like that, using the methane from the from the lavatory waste to power vehicles with, to cook with, to keep the warm buildings with. We've got all this stuff available to us that we throw away because our consciousness says that's not valuable, which is interesting. Okay, we're going to spend another 2 or 3 minutes on this, and then we're going to switch gears to talk about our spiritual, cultural, latent powers issues. Anyone else want to?
I was going to say something, Sharif. This
okay.
is Robin.
Okay.
I think that the deal for me with water is that as long as the average American can turn on a faucet and have clean water coming out, there isn't a very strong awareness or consciousness that there's a problem. I mean, you can hear it and intellectually you might get it, but the fact of the matter is it's not a problem for you. And that's what I like so much about what we're going through with the COVID pandemic, is that it's in every household. It's in every household in some fashion, you know, and in some, it's a lot more extreme and a lot more of a disaster for some families than others. But, you know, I hate to think that we have to get to the point where we don't have clean water coming out of the tap, which we actually probably don't, a lot of us, in order to respond. And I have had that experience here on my farm in Kansas when I first got here, and for many, many years, you could not drink the water that came out of the tap. It was terrible. And it came from 250 feet below the surface and was still not potable at all. And so then you do become aware. You pay attention to how you're using water and how much water you're using and where's it going to come from and how am I going to have a group of people here, which, you know, is what I do all the time, and be able to provide them all with water to drink. So it's an awareness thing.
Definitely true. Shoot, I wish I was not on my phone right now, because I would ask for a show of hands of how many of us have been in societies where the water was not good to drink, where you would have to boil the water or not drink it at all, etc. Actually, put your hand up and leave it up. I'm going to thumb through real quick here. So it looks like all of us that I can see have had this as an experience. Okay. Okay, thank you. That is something that gets your attention, just as Robin was saying. That's something that, you know, just what? I can't drink this? And it made it look, made us as a society look really bad when Flint, Michigan started having the experience of their brown and flammable water. Having fire shooting out of your water pipes is should get your attention that something's wrong. Okay, but we treated Flint, Michigan like a local event. Okay, we treated Flint, Michigan like, oh, this is something that those people are going through, as opposed to recognizing this is something that can affect all of us and will eventually affect all of us. Let's have a global solution to this, and a non-industrial solution to this. I mean, you know, water wants to clean itself. It's not, you know, all we have to do is get us out of the way of it, and we can start experiencing things in a very different way. But Robin, your question has a deeper significance to it. If something isn't directly happening to me or someone I know personally, is it happening? I forget the philosopher who said, if the tree falls in the woods and a person's not there to hear it, doesn't make a sound. And what an arrogant question. you know, if it doesn't happen to a human being, it doesn't matter. You know, and no, if it doesn't happen to a human being that I recognize as a human being, it doesn't matter. So we talk about the poor being people who are not me. We talk about the homeless, and the homeless are people who are, let's see, not me. And we can talk about them, we can look on the television at them, and then turn the TV to something else. So I think that one of the reasons that people have gone as nuts around the COVID situation, and I've been here in Portland seeing my share of nuts, okay, seeing my share of people who think that they're being responsive when what they're being is fearful and reactive. And partly it's because, oh my God, something's actually happening to me. And it's like, yeah, well, these things happen, and let's get a handle on it, and let's get serious about how to deal with it. Okay, and that was me biting my tongue so that I could be less talking and more responsive. Let's take one or two more questions or comments regarding water and water issues. What does water look like in our future? If anybody wants to tackle that one. And I noticed that there's a rich life on chat right now. I can't see them. I see half of a sentence come up, and I want to say, and then it's like dot dot dot. And I have no idea what else was being said. I hope you are all following this. I hope that this is something that's meaningful for you. Okay, I'll look at all of this at the end when I get the recording of it. Okay, so water going once, water going twice. Anyone else want to say anything about water?
You do have to record the chat separately from the audio. And if you want to save the chat, you have to record.
Yes, and if I've done everything correctly, it's being recorded that
You're
way.
on the money. The other thing, I said you're on the money. You got it.
Okay. Yeah.
About water, if agriculture is hugely wasteful, you know, like the majority of what water waste in North America and other industrialized countries is from agriculture.
From industrial agriculture, yes.
Yes, and we need regenerative agriculture, permaculture, which I've just put in the notes, because those systems, besides thinking everything is interconnected and inherently sacred and valuable, also save a lot of water. And
right.
We're selling water to industry, agricultural industry, factory industry, Nestle bottling water for 0.0001 cent per gallon, something crazy, small amounts, that they, at least as a very first start in rectifying this, they need to start paying a more fair price for water.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, actually, one of the things that would correct so many wrongs, okay, is if Congress were not owned by corporations but actually responded to people, we could fix almost all the problems immediately.
Yep.
How many of us get unwanted junk mail dumped into our mailboxes? And the reason that junk mailers can do all that is that the postal rates for junk mailers is so, it's ridiculous how, it's almost like the post office exists to do junk mail. The America's worst polluter, paper polluter, is the post office. They're the ones throwing this stuff out there. If you just made them pay the same thing I got to pay for a first class envelope, that the junk mail will go to zero. But look at how many corporations would not like that, and those corporations are the ones that would that are paying the salaries or paying the perks for the Congress people. So either we need to make billions of dollars right now so that we can buy our own Congress people, or maybe we can get a whole other Congress that's not responsive to money. Okay, that, like we can be the new Congress. I saw fleeting across my screen for 2 seconds. Suzanne had asked, had made a comment about you don't have video. Is there something that you want to say, and then just turn on your microphone and say it now? But if it was about something else, then I will stand corrected. Okay.
Actually, yes, I do. Sorry, you get my whatever oddness here.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, we're both getting on tonight.
water and industrial agriculture are definitely a problem. It's, I think, a more basic issue, though, that we have forgotten that from the land we come to the land we go. We have forgotten our basic connection to the earth. How are we teaching our children? What are we teaching everyone around us? Much of capitalism, in the bad sense, is all about how I can make money, how I can conquer, which is Western European civilization of the last 400 years or so. That attitude has to be addressed, because that's part of the whole me thing. Everything is about me getting more, winning the war, but it's not a war. So, and I'll mute myself again. That was just what I wanted to say about that whole thing. I think it's a much more basic problem that's at a deeper level than just industrial agriculture or things like that. That's just like the fruit.
Yeah, well, number one, yes, you are right. Number two, I'm going to invite you to expand your this scope. I think it isn't the last 400 years. I think it's the last 10,000 years. But 10,000 years is a drop in a bucket when you compare to the age of the earth, or even the age of humanity on the earth. Okay, so this attitude that you talk about in terms of conquering. We conquer the land, we conquer the people on the land, we cut down all the trees, we dam the rivers, we convert the entire thing to our purpose, and we think of that as being godly. Okay, that this is our manifest destiny, that this is we're doing, we believe that this is the right thing to do. And it's not. And we're going to learn how to do things differently. And I'm hoping that is something that we will we can address in our future. Okay, it's 7 o'clock now. We got 1 more hour. I'm going to try to do something, I'm going to see if my internet has fixed itself, and that way I can get online with my computer. At least I may continue to talk to you through the phone here, but at least I can
And Sharif, while you do that, I know that Greg has a comment, and Angela, also have a comment. I'll let Greg go first, though, because I saw him raising his hand.
Okay, well, y'all see stuff I'm not seeing at all here. So
Thank you, Angela.
Go ahead. Yeah.
I just, I wanted to say that comment about junk mail. I put it in the chat. It sounds like it's starting in the middle, because junk mail leads us to a deeper problem with his advertising. Why do we take so much energy and put it into trying to sell things to each other? And then beyond selling things to each other, why do we have to occupy ourselves with making things in order to sell things to each other, right? Don't we have enough resources for everybody just to have really good clothes, really good car, really good computer that don't have to be replaced all the time, right? So what we really want is a system where we allocate our resources so that everybody's basic needs are met. The need for food, water, shelter, clothing to the degree necessary. And then we can use the rest of our energy for other things besides manufacturing things. Once we disconnect the idea of having to have a job in order to have a place, to earn our place, then we could start doing other things.
Could I piggyback off of Greg's idea? Because that's, in Greg, if I accidentally take it too far off, you can, stop me. But that was similar to my question of, like, in the book, in the part that I just read, I haven't got through the whole thing, is about the system. I was reading the part, they're in the wagon traveling. And so my question is, what is that dance between, because it kind of seems to me like in that part of the story is they're using the system to change the system. And so what is that dance between just creating a whole brand new system that makes the old system irrelevant? And it seems like what I understand of the story so far is that you have to use part of the old system to bridge the gap to the new system versus just going straight to the new system. And kind of like, I forget specifically, sorry, Greg, what you just said, but like, so we know this is the priority. Why don't we just do that?
Number one, yes. Number two, I think I hope you recognize I can see all of you now. Okay, this is really cool. So it's working for right now anyway. You are right, and there's several places in the book where there are interim solutions proposed. Okay, where for example, they were saying that the idea of literally picking water up with these pillows and moving it over here is a temporary measure. We'll do that for a while, and then something else will happen. It would be great if we had all the money in the world that could just go out and build these new communities pristine, just drop them in place, and never have to negotiate with, I don't know if you've gotten to the chapter on the Tampa Accords, but that was a pretty rough negotiation. The folks there did not want the Awakening Center, well, some of the folks did not want the Awakening Center working with them. And so so the notion of using the system, using the elements of the system, as long as you've got them there, and then when it's time to change it, then you change that system. And not getting used to using the system that way, because it's really easy to just say, oh yeah, we'll put a new electrical system in next year. Oh yeah, we'll cut back our electrical usage next year. And next year never comes. And so what we have to do is start recognizing that that we have to be on a schedule, we have to be on a timeline. We know and I hope this isn't the first time you're paying attention to this. We know that the money system will fail. And I don't mean fail from the point of view of, oh, it's going to get really rough for some people, etc. I mean, all the stuff that you call money right now, the paper stuff, the plastic stuff, etc., will disappear. Okay, so it'll disappear. Something will take its place, unless you're so tied, you're so mentally tied to that system, you can't think of anything else. In which case, from your point of view, the world has come to an end. And what are you going to do when the world comes to an end? We know that the political system will fail. It's failing right before our eyes. What's going to come next? We have, I won't even call it a privilege, I'm going to call it a blessing. We have the blessing to be able to think about that right now. How many of us are choosing not to think about it? And we're doing something, this conversation on the water is getting really, really interesting, which is why I'm going to stop it right now. And we're going to switch gears because we've got less than an hour to talk about our spiritual, cultural, latent powers issues. So I want all of us to reach over and put on our spiritual, cultural hats now. And I want us to have questions, comments, thoughts, etc., regarding that, regarding our spiritual, cultural reality. And I'm looking right now at the, to find who was talking about that. I think we've got 4 people there. So who wants to take a stab or first stab? I've noticed that there's some folks who have not commented, and I actually am going to shout out to my grandson, Talib, who is on the call right now. Talib, I don't know if you are at a place where you actually have video, but you should turn it on so we can see you. And if not, you should if you've got a question or a comment, you can unmute yourself because we cannot hear you. And you can I'm not seeing or hearing, so I guess you're okay. I guess it's a little bit intimidating when you're 14, and I think that I'm probably the next youngest online at 18. So yeah, and all the rest of y'all are old people. Spiritual, cultural. I think that for both, and when I was working on the 12 global challenges, hang on for a second. Is this the group I promised the 12 global challenges to? I'm on so many Zoom calls. I know I was talking to somebody about 12 global challenges. So oh, and there he is. There's a picture anyway. There's someone I was promising the 12 global challenges to, but I guess it wasn't this group because I don't see any recognition. Okay.
Yes, it was us. It was us.
Yes, it was. Okay. Well, I have a video.
Yes.
I will put in the links. I will put in the links, and I will get that to you. Okay. So we talk about being a religious society. We talk about being a Christian society. And then for most of the actions of our society, most of the actions of our leaders, our political leaders, our economic leaders, our social leaders, etc., for most of them, they act exactly the opposite of not just Jesus, but every other spiritual, religious leader, wisdom teacher, etc. We've taken all of those values and just completely perverted them so that they're looking like this now. If you remember the movie Wall Street many, many years ago, where the very, very famous conversation by Gordon Gekko saying greed is good, greed will help America stay strong, okay? We have to be the ones that turn that back. And not from the point of view of being Christians or Muslims or Buddhists or Baha'is or anything else, but from the point of view of being a new kind of leader. And I don't mean I don't think that there's a good name for us. What's his name? Already took the term Jedi Knights. We need to be the Jedi Knights without the lightsabers, okay? But we need to be the ones that people look up to, and we need to be the ones that people want to emulate, and we need to be the ones that people will listen to because they know that we won't lie to them, okay? That there's no reason that we would have for lying to them. Okay, I'm not seeing any. I can now see digital hands if you want to put a digital hand up. I can now see meat hands if you want to wave a meat hand around. And I'm not seeing that happening right now. So I'm going to introduce a topic in our spiritual cultural. We've had some issues regarding.
You missed David. David was waving. David Thompson.
Oh, okay. I'm not seeing you, but go for it.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you fine. And this is so wild. I'm looking at a still picture of you on the computer. I'm looking at a moving picture of you down there on the. I'm so confused now. Okay, so got you.
So you were sort of focusing on organized religion as sort of the essence of the problem with cultural spiritual today. I would like to make a comment that there have been times in our own nation's history where there was almost a spiritual cultural happening. And one of the things I'm thinking about almost brings us back to the water, because in the early 70s, there was an outbreak of tremendous concern about the environment. And we passed the Clean Water Act, Clean Air Act, Safe Drinking Water Act, and so on. And everybody believed that was wonderful. And I think everybody still does. But what has happened in the interim is that the large corporations have discovered that these are impediments to some of the time to what they want to do. And so the timber companies are told, well, you can't spray herbicides within 25 feet of a stream. And they found ways, in fact, it was 100 feet, they found ways to knock that down through the courts over the years to practically nothing. So they just spray all this crap into the streams. And the people in Kansas, the farms aren't protected by the Clean Water Act and the Safe Drinking Water Act. And so the people that, you fertilize your crops and you scour them every year with plowing and disking and replanting. and pretty soon the nitrites in the groundwater make it undrinkable. And that's the farmer's problem. And that's my friend in Moundridge, Kansas. They can't drink her own water. But I think the problem is that over the
let me interrupt you for a second, because I want us to have the discipline that if we're talking about a problem, we're also going to talk about the solution. So I want you to be solutioning now. And Suzanne, I recognize your hand is up after David.
I think there's a tremendous support for all of these environmental laws. I think the problem is what you already alluded to. We've got to reduce the power of the corporations to influence legislatures and the courts, and to break down these laws. We need to maybe get all that feeling back and make them bills of rights, part of the amendments to the Constitution.
Yeah, and the idea, the basic issue is should a corporation even exist? Does it have a right to exist? And I think the answer, if they're doing what they've been doing, I think the answer is no. And I think that the reason people invest in bad corporations is that they make a lot of money. I think if people lose their money, if you just, I'm in favor of capital punishment for corporations. If they do something bad, you dissolve them, you take all the money and you put it into charity, and that should get people to start thinking about where they want to invest their time and their energy. So, and since corporations are not living things, I have no problem with cutting off their heads and letting them be an example. I'm noticing on chat that y'all are stacking yourselves up right now, which is really good. So, so Suzanne, you were next.
Okay, well, I guess to me, the thing that we need to be paying attention to is that it's not about what religion or any of that. It's much more about our connection, both with other human beings, but with the rest of the earth, with all of those things. There's a spiritual dimension. Some people like to hide and say, no spiritual dimension. Well, when you have experienced it, then you're like, you can't hide. You're out of the box. You can't go back in. And one of the things that we are not doing a good job of as a society is celebrating that. We're much happier just with things that we can touch. So I think one of the things that we need to look at, and I appreciated the latent powers, because there are actually people who could do things like what Manonko did. There are people who can do that and more because of the way they are connected. So we just need to find a way to bring that more to the fore. A lot of our other problems, I think, would start to fall away too. When you're connected to the earth, you don't want to destroy it. It's not a thing. It's like cutting off your finger. Who would do that? That's enough of my comments anyway.
Yeah. No, well, I appreciate all of that. And I want us to be thinking, how do you build the connection when that connection is not native and natural to you? Is not native and natural to me. I had to work at it. So how do we build a connection? How do we learn to build those connections? And I think Catherine, you were next.
We had that spiritual, cultural connection around the 60s and 70s. It got strong, and it addressed probably every single one of these issues that you're talking about, the water, the earth, and all of them. And then the pendulum swung in the other direction. And that just fell into the lap of capitalism and me, and the opposite direction of spirituality. But we're being forced this year, and maybe some of us saw it a few years ago when this book came out, that we need each other, and we especially need planet Earth. But if we create our lives with our minds, as they say in spirituality, then we can create whatever we choose, not only with our lives, but with the lives for humanity. Or we can leave this planet and go trash another one. That's a choice we have. It's a choice we have. And I think we really didn't want to address it, but the planet came up with something that's gotten our attention, that's causing us to address not only the planet, our water supply, but all of these areas that you put here. And it's not separate areas. They're all one. They're all the spiritual, cultural reality. And it doesn't look like one that we want now. Some of us don't want to go back to the other reality, that thing we called the old normal. So we don't need to look at the existing structure, which is government, or the kinds of governments we have. We need to look at a world government, a planetary government that takes care of the planet and all its inhabitants. That's where we need to look. I'm complete.
Okay, thank you. I agree with you, I agree with you, period. However, I also think that we need to think about what do we mean when we say the word government, because if it looks anything like the mess that we've got right now, I am not going to be in favor of it. I think that the kind of government that comes about in Chronicles of the Upheavals is a very small governing, I'll call it an energy or a force, and that kind of permeates all of us and and on a global level helps guide our individual and our local decisions. Right now, the United Nations is the closest thing that we've got to a world government, and it is already the most inept, bureaucratic, money-wasting nightmare. And having done consulting work with the UN, it was really interesting. So we need to have the conversation, which is going to be part of the conversation for tonight. But we need to have the conversation of what does governance mean when all of us are connected at our hearts, and most of us are telepathic. So we're actually listening to all the beings in our local region. We're listening to human beings other places. What happens when we have that kind of connection?
Could I say something, Sharif? I didn't want to stay on too long. But when I say a government, I mean a government from the spirit within. We don't need representative government. We don't need capitalistic government. We don't need the Constitution of the United States. We need to start all over.
Yay! Okay. Who is this? Eric. Eric, can you hang on for a second?
It's
Helena,
Greg,
you have. Oh, actually, I'm looking at. What am I looking at? Okay, Greg. After Greg, Helena, you've had your hand up, and then we go to Eric. Is that okay?
So anyway, what Catherine said is just perfect, because my thoughts about human nature, when we meet foraging bands, people who live the way we evolved to live, they are fiercely egalitarian, and they keep mechanisms in place to keep, they form political coalitions to keep people from being alpha over them. It's called a reverse dominance hierarchy. And what happened when we discovered what Daniel Quinn calls totalitarian agriculture is that our population grew to the point where somebody had to not work in the irrigation ditches. They had to point the way for other people, and thus began the most despotic hierarchy among any primate. So a lot of what I've been thinking about is how can we get back to the way we evolved to live? And the main problem is the way we evolved to live was outcompeted by hierarchical systems. So in order for us to have the kind of government where everybody's equal, we have to get into groups where we all know each other and govern, and not let people who are charismatic sociopaths sell us a bill of goods. So I don't know how to get from where we are to where that is, but I think that's one possible answer, is going back to egalitarian, tribal councils.
Okay, I have a technical issue here. I just lost charge in one of my pods, and so I think the other one will carry me through. If not, I mean, we can go back to the wire. We're getting down to the wire here. Helena, and then Eric.
Okay. I know you're a lot harder to hear, Sharif, because I guess without that other pod, but just to let you know. So following on that, I know in the past, Sharif, you've tried to encourage people to have kind of like develop small communities in their local area, I think, to try to maybe to develop this kind of society where we help each other to move this along. And I'm wondering too, with the latent powers, whether that might help, if there was a community like that, help each other develop those latent powers, because I know that they're definitely latent in me. They're not out there. I mean, I've noticed in my lifetime only a few times where I've been able to know about things through my dreams that actually happened and I found out later, like the next day or so. But it's not something that I feel is in the forefront for me. And I'm wondering if that's actually pretty important for this society that you talk about to come about, because it does seem to play a big role in your book. You're on mute. Sharif, you're on mute.
Hello, hello. You can see I'm back on the cord now. The other one died in the middle of what you were saying. So if I'm not fully responding, say, no, you gotta say more or less or whatever. Yes, the latent powers are absolutely key to our maturity as a species. I'm not, I don't want to overstress that, but it's time for humanity to wake up. We've been in our teenage years for too long. It's time for us to develop all that we are. How many of you have had some level of experience with any latent powers, being able to telepathy, clairvoyance, having experiences in our future? I've got my hand up. I see two hands up. Okay, but a number of you have never had that as an experience. when you do, it's going to be really important. It's going to be really interesting. So much of what's happening right now with people beating their heads against each other is simply a matter of them not being able to drop down into their hearts and listen from the heart. And when we are able to do that, when we get to the point where we can do that, we will see a whole new kind of world developing when we are operating, first of all, in concert with ourselves. Second of all, in concert with all of the other beings in our locale. Third, in concert with life in general around the planet. And then finally, but not least, but actually the most, is being in concert with the planet herself, being able to listen to a planet like a planet. Now, of course, we know the keepers, the indigenous people have been doing this for ever since we've had indigenous people, which is like forever. So it's those of us who have learned how to be out of step with that have to learn how to be back in step with it. So does that, even though I heard half of your question, does that respond to some of it?
Yeah. I guess I'm just wondering too, is it something that we can help each other develop, or is that something we each individually have to do on our own?
Okay. This is the part where if I were really saying this with emphasis, I'd be banging my table and jumping up and down and screaming, okay? This is how important this part is. You cannot develop this level of consciousness by yourself. All the efforts that I see right now, people talking about expanding their consciousness, etc., they're talking about doing it on an individual level. If I took nothing from that cave in the Himalayas, except for this is the part that is the most important. You cannot develop it by yourself. Regardless of how much you can develop as an individual, the holonic consciousness is so much bigger that we with our individual minds, can't even conceive it. So our challenge is to take a leap of faith, not really a leap because I'm part of this consciousness. It's not like this is something happening to those people over there and I'm going to get, it's not like I'm saying, give me all your money and give me your bank codes, your PIN numbers, etc. And then just trust me. It's like, no, we all get to develop this together. This may be the biggest stumbling block that people in this country have. People in other countries already have it. They already see the world that way. But for our experience, our challenge is, and we know people who have deep clairvoyant abilities, who can see things. We know people who are deeply telepathic, etc. And that is like, kind of walking across my carpet with your socks on and getting a little spark, like touching somebody, getting a little shock. Some of you have had the experience of having a big shock, okay, like when you have an electrical discharge, is like, oh, ow, that stung a little bit. Now, compare that to how much electricity is going through your computer right now, okay? Compare that to how much electricity is going through the transformer out on the pole right now, okay? Compare that to how much electricity is going through the Bonneville Dam or the Hoover Dam right now. That's what I'm talking about. So we can continue to act like individuals and do a little spark here and a little spark there and think we're doing something. Or we can start harnessing the true potential, the true energy and start dealing on a level that is much more profound than we can ever experience. This stuff, and I'm going to risk 2 bangs here, this stuff is really important, okay? This is like a key element to everything we're doing, and we're still approaching it as individuals. When each of us starts getting a group together, each person on this call gets a dozen people together, and the only thing that we're going to do is meditate together to harness the latent powers. At that point, it's going to start getting really interesting. And when that happens, we're going to see things happening outside of what we think of as cause and effect, outside the realm of cause and effect. And we're going to start seeing manifestations happening in some very powerful ways. And Eric, I apologize for the soliloquy, but I really thought that that was a really important point to cover. So Eric, do you still want to say something? And it looks like you are frozen to me. Okay, so Eric, if you unfreeze, you can go ahead and join us, but if not, then we can continue on here. Anyone else want to do a hand raise? And I'm recognizing.
To me.
Say again?
Eric didn't look frozen to me. I think he should try talking.
Okay. Yeah, so unmute yourself, Eric, if you are going to talk. Okay, there you go. Yeah.
Can you hear?
And now I can see and hear you. Yes. Oh, you come to life. Okay. Yes.
No, I mean, that's a tough follow. I mean, that's what you said, Sharif, and what I've been listening to you talk about in the book, the awakening centers, and that's part of, I think, you know, for all of us is we can't just think about changing. We have to do it. And meeting with each other, I think, is important. And I wanted to kind of piggyback on what Angela was saying earlier about the cart and horse delivering the food from the farmer to the center of the city. The consciousness aspect of that, being able to be aware of our actions, our behaviors every day when we wake up, setting an intention. But yes, I mean, I think that's, you know, that building that bridge in which you're saying, Sharif, about learning about being more thoughtful when we speak, being more thoughtful in our actions, not just with ourselves and our immediate family, but within our community, and growing that slowly. But I mean, I think we're at a point now, like you said, we don't want to go back. I don't want to go back. I know none of us on this call wants to go back to the way things were. You know, I do meditate, you know, and one of the things you talked about earlier was greed. And I said, you know, we renounce greed, hatred, and delusion. And those things are, you know, Buddhist, you know, they have a Buddhist orientation, but I mean, that's something that I think everybody can, you know, kind of agree with, and looking internally and looking at oneself and what oneself has done can be a bit overwhelming. You're right. When you start to really waking up, it can be very overwhelming. And I'm not going to kid anybody on that, because it is. It can be very overwhelming. And you just have to maintain that center and keep moving forward in the healthiest way as possible. And this call for me and to everybody listening to everybody share, I think is a healthy start with the book. I think we need to continue to move forward on that note. And but it's just as I'm humbled and grateful to be here and be a part of this. So I'll leave it at that. But thank you very much, and very, very, very grateful.
Oh, thank you. And life is so okay. So there's something happening regarding the latent powers that are happening right now. Okay, this is happening right here, right now, on this call. Just by our acknowledgement, the latent powers start to open. So as we're talking, I had a very powerful phone call, well, Zoom call. I'm referring to myself as a Zombie now because I'm doing Zooms like 3 or 4 times a day, and no wonder my earbuds give out. I was on the call with a friend of mine from Sri Lanka. I hadn't talked to him in maybe 20 years or so. Okay, and so we were playing a lot of catch up, and we were talking about what are we doing within each other in life now. And Eric, as he was talking, he used exactly the same language in the same sequence that you just used. Okay, he's in England, and you've never met him, and you're using the exact same languaging, talking about greed and hatred and delusion, okay, and talking about how we are opening ourselves up, etc. So on the one hand, we don't have to try to open ourselves up. It's not going to happen anyway. Those of us who are cooperating with the opening up are going to have both the opportunity to be helpful and to be in a leadership capacity. Those of us who are cooperating with this will have the responsibility to open up and to blend with others and to make all of these connections, and in some ways to make the sacrifices. I think about, and I've shared this with a number of you before, because I was raised across the river from Philadelphia, one of the school trips that we would make pretty regularly is to Independence Hall. And all the other kids are just like, I don't care about all this stuff. I just want to get out of the classroom. But I was always affected by being there, by being in Independence Hall. I remember the assembly room is on the 2nd floor. I remember walking up the stairs that Thomas Jefferson walked, the stairs that Benjamin Franklin walked, the stairs that John Adams walked, and looking at the same chairs that they sat in a few hundred years ago, where they struggled with the notion of what does it mean for us to be in a society? What does it mean for us to have a relationship with each other that we've never, ever, ever on this earth had before, where we're saying we don't need a king. We don't need anybody to tell us what to do. We don't need to protest somebody doing something. We are going to be the ones that are going to make these decisions. And to recognize that the decisions that they made and the decisions they failed to make, they weren't perfect, or things that we've lived with for the last couple hundred years. We right now are setting the stage for our descendants, not for the next couple hundred years, but for the next couple thousand years. And that's why we're being asked to take this as deeply as we can take it. Okay, and I'm zipping the lip again. And Robin, you've had your hand up very patiently for a while. If you want to unmute yourself, and
Okay.
we will hear from you.
All right. So as we're talking, I'm going back to where we started with the imaginal cells. And the two guiding principles there that I keep hanging on to and working with throughout this whole pandemic time period especially. One being that the imaginal cells only become effective to build the butterfly body when they clump together. So that's why we all are so drawn to be on these calls. And I'm on several different calls where we're meditating and working with the creation process. And I know of other groups, lots and lots of other groups are doing the same thing. I think there's millions of them all around the world. And that is the creative force. So clumping the imaginal cells together so that the butterfly begins to form is key. And then the other key piece for me is as the body of the butterfly forms, it draws its nourishment from the breakdown of the caterpillar body, the goop. So that's where we are right now. We're seeing lots of stuff breaking down all around us. The economy, the stock market, the healthcare system, the way we work, education, all these different things are in a big chaotic goop right now. And so we can energetically draw our strength, our nourishment from that is being released by the chaos, the breakdown, breaking apart, the opening up. So I find that to be really energizing for me personally, to remember that I can sit with that every day and absorb energy that is right here to nourish me to be in the creation of the new. So just one other thing I wanted to say is this notion of the process of creating our new way of being is for me about remembering the essence of the keepers, the indigenous ones who already knew how to live in harmony on this planet. It already exists. It's already here. And it's not only those who came before us. There are people alive on the earth all over the place right now who know how to live more harmoniously on the planet. And so absorb that, remembering that, bringing that into myself as the essence of the humanity we want to be. And I feel complete.
I was really trying not to comment on what you were saying at all because of our time, but I can't resist. Yes, yes, and yes. Clumping is good. Drawing down, when we're talking about drawing down the nourishment from the caterpillar body, that's exactly how I felt when I cashed that stimulus check. it's like this is definitely caterpillar money here, and I put it right in the bank. You know, so yes.
And you thank the universe.
That's right. I thank.
Okay, I was about to say something, and yes, I thank the universe for bringing that into this direction. Yes. For those of us, David, I got you, and I think Mary, you want to say something also.
Yeah.
For those of us who have had the opportunity to work with the keepers in indigenous situations, it's always a blessing. It's almost like, why haven't we always lived this way? And I thought that a really good movie that shows the transition from a breaker way of thinking to a keeper way of thinking was that Kevin Costner movie, Dances with Wolves, where it's kind of like, okay, it's like, I don't understand why you do these things this way, and he came to an understanding over time. Keepers have always been with us. They've been guiding us all this time, and we weren't accepting the guidance. Let's accept the guidance now. Yes. So David first.
Well,
David?
I think, can you hear me?
Yep.
I think being Hellenic isn't just about finding other Hellenic people. It's about treating everybody with respect, and even trying to figure out, who is this person that's born and living in the same world I am, facing, the basic survival problems. And I think that's a part of the process. And, Anko was discovered, and people were looking for people that were maybe valuable. And I think that's fine. I mean, they were small, they were trying to grow, but they had to grow very carefully. But everybody has to be considered. I don't like the word sacred, but I think that everybody is a potential part of this Hellenic world that we live in. And I don't want to lose those people. And I think engaging somebody in conversation that you already have pegged as one of these people that says, you can't make me do that. I'm an American. I mean, those people are valuable to talk to, and you have to acknowledge their belief system. But you can ask them, after you acknowledge their belief, how did you come by that belief? And they'd love to talk about it. And maybe that's good. I think it is.
Yes.
That's all.
So do I. I've learned some very, very powerful lessons from people that you would look at and call, oh, the right wing, or the blue collar, or the so-and-so, the different people. If you open yourself to say, there's a lesson in here, you'll find it. So excellent. Mary?
Yes, thank you. I do not, I posted this in the notes, I do not agree that the U.S. Constitution, I'm from the States originally, I grew up in Alabama. I studied the U.S. Constitution. It was not creative, brand new stuff. It was lifted directly from the Iroquois of New York, and their society. They just copied that. They didn't create it. And somebody else was talking about going back to hunter-gatherer people and who we are as a species. Whether we're 2 or 4 million years old. That was our childhood. I think our pre-adolescence began about 10,000 years ago when we developed agriculture. And then when you had stockpiles of grain to protect and you weren't moving around, you developed kings and more of that sort of thing. I mean, warfare existed before then on a small scale, but the loss of egalitarianism and the difference in society, it was like we had got addicted to this drug of inequality, and some people are haves and some people are have-nots. I know in the Ojibwe, traditional Ojibwe culture, I've studied with those folks for a long time. The women elders picked the chief, and the chief might have waged war and conducted stuff. But if they didn't like what the chief was doing, they dehorn him, which just means they took his little horn hat away, and he was done. If he, you know, and so there was a check and balances there. If he got too big for his britches and started thinking he was a king, he was out of there. And we somehow need to progress to adults and set aside that adolescent addiction to greed and, oh, maybe I can get more than everybody else. And I don't want to plan for 7 generations. I don't even want to plan for tomorrow. I just want now. You know, and my stockholders care about how much money we make this quarter. They don't care
quarter.
About, huh?
That's the time frame.
That's the quarter. Yeah. And humans used to be able to at least plan to get through the winter because they had to have food. You know, we've even lost that ability. We're not very good at long-term planning. Like you said, if you have 8 years warning that a comet's coming, we don't deal with that nearly as well as what's hot on our heels. As we reach adulthood, we have to learn those things. And we have to plan for 7 generations, and we have to plan for everybody, and somehow find a way to reestablish egalitarianism as a basis of our society, not an inequality of wealth and power. And the evil corporations have got to go. I don't think corporations should exist. They're legal fiction. They have all the rights of a human being in law, but yet they have very few of the responsibilities of a human being, you know. And that's why they were invented by people who wanted to get away with things.
So I think that this is a comprehensive way of getting us to a culmination point. So thank you for that. And also, let me say, I completely agree with everything you said, including the part about the Iroquois. What I said, what was new, and this is why I really want us to sit in this energy. When people like, you know, Franklin or Adams or Jefferson or Washington were sitting there, in their history, all the way back as far as they could see, there was a king or a ruler telling them what to do.
True.
So this is the first time that they had an opportunity to think, oh, maybe we can do this ourselves. So this is our opportunity right now for us to think anew, and to and actually to use something like this as not a guide, but as a catalyst to say, let's get that blank sheet of paper and start, you know, how do we want to govern ourselves? How do we propose that our neighbors govern themselves for the good of all? Folks, this has been, for me, a very lively conversation. I started to break us into groups where one group would talk about water, and then another group would talk about this, another group would talk about that, but I'm glad we hung together. I have to now go back and read all the comments that are in my comment column right now. I will get this video out to all of us so that we can think about the ideas contained in it. And I look forward to seeing as many of us as can hang in there next week, same time, 6 to 8 Pacific, where we're going to start really talking about looking forward at how do we do this new society. Rather than complaining about the old one, we're going to really start focusing in on the new. And I'm going to ask you to meditate on that for this month, for this week coming up. And I'm going to ask you to keep us focused on the biggest possible picture of the coming adulthood, the new adulthood for our humanity. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your putting up with my technical issues, and I'm really asking for all of us to be guided on this path. Look forward to seeing all of you next week. Bye.
Bye.
See you all. Bye.